mics? Nope, one mic.
Doesn't matter. There's a switch.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, good. I thought we'd be competing with the generators over there. Yesterday we had a couple of planes taking off just as we started to speak. My name is David Colley. I'm a writer. I'm not a POW, never have been. I have written extensively on World War II. I have several books concerning the Second World War, one on the Red Ball Express, one on black volunteers who fought in Western Europe at the end of the war. I also have written articles on the war, many articles on the war. One of them recently related to Oberursel in southern Germany, where every Allied airman was taken after he was shot down and interrogated. And it's a fascinating story. There is a book about it. I didn't write it. But if anybody's interested in one aspect of the POW experience, it's called Nazi Interrogator, and it's a description of how the German Air Force dealt with Allied prisoners of war, airmen, and they dealt with them, you might call it with a soft touch. There was very little torture or anything like that, and it was amazing what kind of information they got out of the POWs just by treating them as friends. I have interviewed many POWs. In fact, one of the more recent interviews took place around Christmas time. Last Christmas, when I interviewed a POW who had been captured in the Battle of the Bulge. And we don't know very much about the POW experience. For those of us who go back a number of years, you can remember Hogan's Heroes, which made the POW experience look like a kind of a fun thing to have experienced. And for most of these guys, and you'll hear it today, it was not fun at all. In fact, the impact remains very strong on men who were in captivity. The man that I interviewed at Christmas time, every Christmas, around Christmas, he starts to get irritable. And his wife was saying that he gets more irritable as the older he gets, and he's in his 80s. So the POW experience really is somewhat unknown, and we have three men here today who are bona fide POWs. They were shot down over Europe during the Second World War. One of them was shot down twice, and the stories that they have are really fascinating. For instance, Frank Lachinski, right to my left here, I interviewed him, and one of his descriptions, and I think he'll tell you about it again, was looking out. He was a tail gunner and looking out over a fleet of 1,000 planes on the way to a target. I mean, just imagine that. That's something you'll never see again, never saw in the past, and will never see again. Let me just introduce them. There's Frank Lachinski on my left. He was a B-24 gunner, shot down over Yugoslavia, and was brought out, and then shot down again over Poland. Has an amazing story about getting out of Germany. Paul Gordon, the longest, in the center, the longest of the experience of the POWs, was shot down in 1942 over France. Spent nearly 3 years as a POW, and the impact is still being felt. And one of the things that he mentioned to me was that he always was able to sleep through the night without any trouble before he went to war, and after he was shot down and lived as a POW, he never really has spent one night since with having as restful a sleep as he used to have. That's the kind of impact that these things can have. My far left is Frank Speer, a fighter pilot, P-51 fighter pilot, fighter jockey, if you want to call him that. He was shot down on a mission to Poland in 1944, I think he said the week before D-Day. Crashed his plane and evaded the Germans for 8 days in Germany. Now that's quite a feat if you can evade the Germans in their own territory. Was captured, eventually captured, and his experiences, he will relate, are really, again, fascinating. And it's just amazing to think that these men experienced all this, and we just really have no idea in our minds what they did experience during their wartime experience. So each man will speak for about 20-25 minutes about their experiences, and then we will have hopefully about 10-15 minutes where you can ask some questions. So again, I will introduce them as Frank Lachinski and Paul Gordon and Frank Speer. We'll start off with Frank Lachinski.
Good morning. One thing, in case you're, yeah, he forgot to do this here. There's a small story about my experience in this book. This is put out by PCN TV. You can go on the internet and get it from there. And this is a book by Stephen Ambrose, and in the third paragraph of the acknowledgments, he thanks me for helping him write it. It's primarily about George McGovern, who was one of the members of our bomb group. And in fact, he was one of those that we led on many raids. But anyway, I was the one who was shot down twice. In total, we lost 4 airplanes. One of them was a brand new one that we just picked up in Topeka, Kansas, and flew to Marrakech in Africa, and then from Marrakech we flew to Tunis, and when we touched down in Tunis, we had 27 flying hours on that plane, and the right landing gear started to wobble, and it snapped off, and the wing dropped down. We tore 2 engines out, and the vertical stabilizer was knocked off. And after I got back a few years ago, I sent away and got the accident report on that particular plane, and it lists all of us as crew members. And in it, the final determination as the cause of the crash was a defective heat-treated strut, and that was why it broke off. And that was one of the dangers, in fact, all of us faced during that you know, everybody was learning their job. That might have been Rosie the River learning her job, but we were kind of training on the job because there was no way we were fully trained going into combat, because I was in combat 9 months after I got into the service, so you figure out it not too much time. But anyway, the second time we were shot down over, we had to bail out over, he said, we had to bail out of, because we bombed an oil refinery, the Odetal oil refinery up in southern Poland, around near Auschwitz, where and we were damaged there, and we couldn't get back to the base, and so we picked up a spot that we knew had a 90% probability of being picked up by either partisans or Chetniks. There was a map in our headquarters that had Yugoslavia color-coded to indicate the chances of being picked up by friendly people. And we were picked up immediately by partisans. And they quickly took me to a barn, and they made up a two-wheeled ox cart with hay on the back, and they took my flying clothing. Also, they had picked up a little before me one of our other crew members, Craig King, and we both sat on the tail end of the ox cart, and the partisans sent a patrol down the road to the next turn in the road where they were still visible, and they also sent a patrol up over the hilltop nearby, and they using hand signals, they signaled that it was safe for us to continue, and we traveled that way for 3 days, on our way to a town called Sansky Most. And when we got to Sansky Most, there were 45 airmen in the town, and the OSS had worked to with the partisans and the Chetniks to have them rescue airmen and feed them to certain towns or certain areas. And in Sansky Most, there was a meadow outside of town, and the British had parachuted a radio man into town, and he, when it got dark, a few days after we got there, I guess about 3 or 4 days, we went out to the meadow, and he brought a radio along with him, a very big radio, and when we heard engines overhead, he got on the radio and identified as a friendly plane, and a contingent of partisans had come out with us, and two of them had lined up in 2 lines apart, about a width of a runway apart, and the partisan, when he got the okay from the radio man, he shouted something, and the men in the lines lit up torches, and the plane landed in between them, and as the plane passed by each one of them, they extinguished the torch, so it was pitch black again, and the first people put on board were anybody who had been wounded or injured, and then they went by seniority, and since the C-47 could only hold 21 passengers, that meant that I was going to be somewhere in the 3rd plane that was going to leave after that, and that's when I did leave, 3 planes later, which again, because of weather conditions, was several weeks later, so we were behind enemy lines there for several weeks. When we got back, we became a lead crew, and that's when, after that was when there were several times when we led the whole 15th Air Force, and that was when I got a chance to see all of the planes that were coming up, following us as we led the way up into the target. On our 21st mission, we got a direct hit with a large caliber anti-aircraft shell. We're up around 20,000 plus feet, and I guess it was either an 88 or a 105 millimeter. We were over Austria at the time, bombing a railroad marshalling yard, and I have a picture here. I'm over in a hangar if you want to see what it looks like. The shell hit about a foot in back of our pilot and just started grazing, going into the plane at that point at an angle, and it tore up through and tore a big hole and knocked out the upper escape hatch, hit the one of the guns in the upper turret, stripped off the cooling barrel, and bent the gun into a 90-degree angle, and it also tore off the plexiglass cover of the turret. Our radio man was sitting in there, and it spun the turret around, and actually the whole plane really leaped into the air when it was hit by that. And it was a tremendous loud noise. You could hear it right through your earphones in your helmet. We brought the plane back, and Stars and Stripes came the next day. They photographed the plane, and that's how I happen to have a picture. He gave each of the crew members a picture of it, and then they wrote an article in Stars and Stripes about it, they junked the plane because it was too big a repair job, and they just stripped it and used it for spare parts. Now, on March 12th, 45, we were leading our bomb group to the Floresdorf oil refinery in Vienna, Austria, and just as we dropped our bombs, we heard it sounded like a siren went off, and I guess because of flak damage or whatever, we one of the engines ran away, and the pilot, co-pilot, and the engineer tried what they could to try to shut down the engine, which they couldn't do, and then they couldn't feather the prop, and the whole plane was vibrating. We thought it might even tear the engine out of the plane, but it finally, I guess, overheated and froze up, and then it created a lot of drag, and we started losing altitude. So we stripped everything out of the plane that we could. We threw it overboard so we could stay aloft. We stripped our guns, our ammunition. We were even, later on when we got down to low enough altitude, we were even pulling the oxygen tanks off of the side of the plane, which if I had thought about it earlier, I don't think we could have done it, but somehow I guess we got the strength to do it. And we had been briefed to, if we couldn't get back to the base, that the Russians had taken an airfield in a place called Pécs, P-E-C-S. We always called it Pécs, but I found out later on that Hungarians pronounced it Pécs. And we tried to get there, and we were in an undercast using dead reckoning to get to the field. But anyway, when we started descending, when we thought we were over the field, we broke out of the clouds at around 4,000 feet, and at 7 o'clock low, I was still back in the tail, and I saw 3 fighter planes coming at us. So I thought maybe I could deter them somewhat, at least keep them some distance away. So I took the turret and aimed the empty gun barrels. So they were just all was left was the like perforated, perforated cooling section. He's right on time. You went off the same time as yesterday. But anyway, with that, there was a number of other hits, because, as I found out in 2004, what had happened was because I went over to Hungary in 2004, but that's why I found out a lot of this information I'm going to tell you now. We had stumbled upon a battle that had broken out 6 days earlier on that section of the front between Russians and Bulgarians on one side and the Germans on the other side. And one of the things I found out, as I said, was that one of the divisions that was the German divisions that was there was a division that had been destroyed at Stalingrad and pulled out of the line back into Germany and rebuilt and sent back into the Balkan area. In fact, after the battle ended 6 days later, I found out that the Germans and the Russians, I guess, and the Germans had so many casualties in that area that the Russians were calling it Little Stalingrad. To give, but anyway, when I bailed out, I made sure I was clear of the plane, and when I opened up the chute, I free fell for a little bit, and when I opened up the chute, I realized that I heard something go, and then I realized that I was being shot at. So I started pulling on my shroud lines to start oscillating in the air. You also fall faster, and when I hit, I really hit hard. I must have been spilling a lot of air out of the thing. And right before I hit the ground, I looked and I saw that there was a line of trenches right in front of me, and there was some barbed wire in the area. So what I did was I came right down on the front lines of a Russian-German front at that point. And a man without a helmet or anything on put his head above the trench, and he went like this. And I thought, well, he didn't take a shot at me, so I quickly took off my parachute harness and jumped into the trench. And when I did, I saw maybe about 12 bayonets on the end of rifles. And then I noticed that there was a German eagle on in the left pocket with the swastika in the center. And the man who had stuck his head above the trench, he just put out his hand and said, "Pistol." So I gave him my 45, and they took me to a dugout, and I stayed there until nightfall. And when it got to be night, they assigned a German to take me from the front lines to the rear, and we had to cross the Drava River because we were very close to the Croatia right at that point, and German headquarters were located in Croatia, and they had never searched me up to this point, and I had 50 rounds of ammunition for my 45 in my right pocket, and I was all along the while I was sitting there, I was trying to figure out how to get rid of them because I didn't think they really appreciated too much when they found it. So when they started ferrying me across the river in a flat boat, I reached in, took a handful of the ammunition out of the pocket and dropped it over the side, and it made a splash. And when it did that, the noise, they stopped pulling, and everybody stopped and listened. I guess they were worried about frogmen or whatever, I don't know, but they waited, and then they started pulling again. And it took me 3 handfuls, and each time I dropped a handful, they stopped. Well, I got rid of every one of them, so I felt pretty good by the time I got over the side. But then they took me to a building in town. It was to the second story, and it was a fairly big room. And I would guess that what it was the headquarters for that operation, because there was a lot of activity. There were people running in and out, and there were a lot of men behind desks, and there was a big pot-bellied stove in the center of the room there, and they took me over near the pot-bellied stove, and there was a German officer laying on a sofa, and they had me, this wasn't one of the more pleasant, what do you call it, interrogations, by the way. You would mention that they had me stripped completely naked, and then they started going through all my clothing, and while I stood there, then they started asking questions, and when we were told to just give our name, rank, and serial number, which I did each time they asked a question. And one of the questions eventually was whether we had bombed Dresden. And I wasn't even aware of what Dresden was at that point. Well, we hadn't bombed it in any event. I just gave my name, rank, and serial number to each answer, and the German officer kept on getting more and more agitated each time I answered, and he said, what would you say when we say we're going to execute you. So I thought, well, I don't think I'm going to have too much choice anyway, so I just gave them my name, rank, and serial number. And one of the things they ran across is I had a little prayer book in my pocket, and they took that out and hit me across the face with it and said, "You bomb women and children and you carry one of these." And anyway, fortunately they didn't execute me, but we got dressed and they took me to a brick wall. And all the movies that you ever saw as a kid, that you kind of were running through your head. But we went to the brick wall and then turned and went around a corner, and the other 5 members of our crew who had been captured were in a building down in the street down there, and they put me in. I was the last one to be brought with them. We became then part of the retreating German army. They decided to retreat 6 days later, and they divided a 40-8 boxcar in half, and they put German guards on one side of it, and there were 6 people from our crew, another 10-man crew, and 13 Bulgarian officers and 1 Russian officer were put in on one half of the 40-8, and we started out late in the afternoon one day, and we were only traveling about 2 hours, and we got strafed by some planes, and they had anti-aircraft guns on a train. They opened up fire with the anti-aircraft guns. But from that point on, when daylight approached, they disconnected the engine and hid it somewhere and left us sitting on one of the sidings somewhere. And it took us about 3 or 4 weeks shuttling back and forth between lines. I guess they had bombed out, and we started going through areas that we knew were going to be, prime targets, because there were areas that marshalling yards that we had been bombing, and we began to kind of feel like live bait is set in a trap for the people to aim at. We were bombed 3 times. The 3rd time we were bombed, and a lot of fires were started in the area, and the bombs were going off. We, to make a short story out of it, running out of time, we broke our own way. The guards had abandoned us in a car, and they went to a quarry. We broke out of the car, and by taking out the barred window up in the at one end of the boxcar, and one of the men could fit through it. We lifted him out, and he unwired the latch on the door and opened it up, and that was how we got out. Well, but during that time, all the while I was a prisoner, we weren't really fed practically at all. For a period of time, we got 4 rye crackers a day. Another period of time, we got the 3 boiled potatoes once a day, and you could eat them all at once, or you could save them for whenever time you want to eat them. There was another time we got like a tomato can full of some green mixture, which I think was probably, it might have been split pea soup, but it was very hot, and so hot that I couldn't really eat it at first, and then when I let it cool down, it hardened into one lump, and it couldn't, so I don't know really what was in it. But we began to dream about food and what we would eat when we got back, and a strange thing was that I never really ate much chocolate, but that was one thing that I dreamt about a lot, and it turned out just about everybody else who was a prisoner with me, that was the main thing that they were dreaming about. I guess I kind of finished through. I think that's about it. So,
Thank you. Next up is Paul Gordon.
Good morning. Good morning, Joe Reed is a personal friend of mine. Just came in the back. He wants to hear the big story, I guess. There's no big story involved. I was a ball turret gunner, and that beautiful B-17 you see flying back and forth. Get in it if you ever get a chance to go for it. There's nothing like it in the world. I got to take 3 of my grandsons up last year. They started all this, asking questions about what happened to me, so I paid them back by taking them for a ride in the B-17, and they loved it. It was something. I was flying out of bombings in England, the 92nd Bomb Group, a ball turret gunner, and on this mission, we needed another man in the plane, and the armorer, the tech sergeant, staff sergeant, he was the master. He was in charge of armament shop, and he could handle the top turret. So I said, come with us, we need somebody, otherwise we can't fly. Well, he got in with us, he wanted to make a mission. And while we were sitting there waiting to take off, I told him to try on his parachute, and he couldn't buckle the leg straps. I said, I'll get a screwdriver and fix it for you. He said, nah, don't worry, I won't need it. Okay. So we got up there, we got over the channel, over in France. We were bombing France at that time. And in a ball turret, believe me, your view is terrific. And that flak that they said you could walk on it, well, it sure looked that way. And it bounces that bomber around like a rubber ball. I mean, I just couldn't believe how it would bounce you around. We weren't attacked by any fighters, just flak. We got over our target, and we couldn't drop the bomb because there was planes below us on target, B-24s, my friend here. So we had to make a 360-degree turn and come back over the target again. And when we got over the target, we got hit with flak. Knocked our number 4 engine out. And I saw out of the corner of my eye, I saw smoke on the side of my turret. And I thought, some poor so-so on fire. I thought, yeah. I turned my turret, and yikes, it's us. Yeah, number 4 is burning up. So I said, there was no attacks at that time, and naturally, when they leave the target, those throttles go to the firewall. Let's get the H out of here. And naturally, with 3 engines, we couldn't stay up with 4. And so, as we dropped back, until we were all alone, my tail gunner called out fighters at 12 o'clock. I looked down and checked them way out there. I said, okay, you watch and let me know if they start in, because I'm going to look around the bottom, make sure nothing coming up from below. Well, I made the swing, and before I got my gun up even, my tail gunner was shooting. As I got my guns up, there's a flock of wolf right on our tail, and his wings looked like he was on fire. Well, he got so close I could actually hear the cannon on it. He turned them loose on us. Well, he got the tail gunner. He got my ball turret. I don't know whether I got him or not. It didn't matter. You were supposed to shoot round bursts of 5 so you don't burn your barrels up. Well, at that time, I don't fire bursts of 5. I squeeze them down and let them go. And he disappeared. But you're too busy. You can't watch all this. And another one come in. I got a few shots at him, and then my guns quit completely. Oh no, I can't shoot. And they told us in England, anytime your guns don't operate, just move your turret. That'll scare them off. Well, I tried that, and it didn't scare those guys off. Those Abbeville kids were good boys. They knew all about that, I guess. Anyhow, I decided, well, I can't shoot back, and my tail gunner's dead, I'm sure. I'm just going to get up in the plane, go back, and I'll be able to shoot back with his guns anyhow. And of course, that was a great decision I made. That's why I'm here today. Plus the fact that there's a man above that kept me alive through all this. I got up, as I turned you must turn your guns down to get out of the turret. As I turned the guns down, I'm looking, there's a flock of wolf pilots sitting looking up at me about 50 feet below me, staring up at me, and I'm looking at him and oh boy. You charge your gun and you watch your live rounds fall out of the gun, falling away and squeeze them, charge them. Well, I got a little frustrated with that. I wanted to blow him out of that airplane. Fortunately for him, it didn't happen. And me, because I guess they'd have taken care of me, those other 8 or 9 guys afterward. But I got up inside the plane, and bullet hole, cannon shell holes coming through the plane, and good Lord. I didn't get a chance to grab my oxygen tank to go back, and this was happening right there. And as a kid, I always thought it must be terrible to die. I thought, it must be horrible. And I was so sure when I went over, I'm going to make 25 missions without a scratch and go home, but no way. My God, I'm going to get killed. And I thought, boy, how easy it is to die. And it nothing to it. And the next thing I thought was, poor mother, what's she going to think when she hears that she lost her son? And I was 21 then, and I had been around, so the next thought to my mind was, no more wine, women, and song for you, Paul. You're not going anywhere anymore. And I didn't know what was coming next. But by that time, my waist gunner started to shoot out the plane. He got hit, and I better put on a parachute, because you can't wear a parachute in the ball turret. And I had my chute tied up in the side of the plane, and I slipped my arms into it and just pulled it together, and it was ungodly crashing noise, and I'm sticking to the side of the plane. I couldn't move, and finally everything got quiet, and I thought, my God, we crashed. I made it. I'm still alive. I stepped over to the window. No, we're still in the air. No engine noise. Wow. My eyes are watering, so I put my goggles down and looked down. I don't know what, this is happening so fast you don't have a chance to think. And I bumped my head on a 50 caliber, flexible 50 at the waist window, and it's upside down. It doesn't belong up there. Why? And what made me look back, and then I realized why I stuck to the plane, why that great noise was, because we didn't have a tail. We're upside down now without a tail. Still coming down, believe me. And I thought, wow, now what? So I thought, well, what should I do? Should I ride it down, or should I jump? Well, I always wondered what a parachute ride was like, so I got to the back of the plane. There wasn't much left, the back by the tail wheel. And I stood there, and I put my hand up on the side of the fuselage, and I slipped. I almost fell out. What did it matter? I was going to jump anyhow. So I had to do it my way. I slipped the second time, the third time, I thought, what the heck are you slipping in? And I looked down, and the blood's pumping out of my foot, running off my glove, and you're slipping in your patriotism. That's what it is. You better make up your mind to get out of here before you pass out. I didn't even know I was wounded until that time. So I thought, now what do? I do a pull-off? I didn't know, because I might catch in the plane, so I'll just flip out of there like a big gingerbread man, which I did, and I grabbed that D-ring, and the last thing I saw was that ring with a cable going through the blue sky, and then I woke up. I didn't buckle my leg straps on my parachute. They were too tight. I thought, oh well, I'll go without it. And what happened was that the buckle right about here on your chest, metal buckle, that came up when it popped open. I went down, the buckle come up and tore my neck open, hit me under the jaw, and knocked me out for a couple of seconds. And I'm choking at that. I don't like parachute riding. So I pulled down, got a hold of it, pulled out for air, and then I dropped. Now that buckle that should be down here is up here. Oh my, that's not good. I'm hanging by this part of my arm. I put my hands, locked my hands together and hung on. I only made a couple of swings and I hit the ground, because we were 25,000 people now we were hit. And it was about roughly 2,000 feet, and I managed to get out of this silly thing. And there wasn't much time left. And of course, the fighter pilot, one of the fighter pilots was circling, and I hit the ground, tore up that Frenchman's field all over again with my face. You really come down hard, like he said. Man, oh man. I stood up, and the German fighter pilot waggled his wings at me like a salute and took off. what he did, I assume he marked that I was alive, a man alive, and I in the field and marked my spot where to come and find me. After he was gone, there was a man come out in the field. Naturally couldn't understand him, and he grabbed me by the elbow to help me out of the field, and I had a bullet jammed into the bone there. It didn't shatter the elbow, luckily. So, oh yeah, we started to hobble across the field, and my foot and my legs were hurting from the shrapnel and the bullet over my foot, and he put me on his back, piggyback, and carried me out of the field. Led me along the road and tried to set me on the crossbars of a bike. That didn't work either with the shrapnel on the back of my legs, but all that stuff. Then he said something, come back with a wooden wheelbarrow. So I was ceremoniously hauled into the village about a half-mile away on a wooden wheelbarrow into the village of Machan. And the ladies in there, the older women, along the side of the street, their aprons up, and they're crying about that poor American flyer that's coming in. He took me to his home, and they all asked me right away, when's the war going to be over? I said Christmas, but I didn't say what year, because I had no more idea than the man in the moon. And they got a girl who come in there could speak English, and they asked lots of questions, let the kids out of school, and they come in with my parachute and whole strings of cartridges from my ball turret, the whole plane. And everybody wanted to see the American flyer. And of course they all came along and they kissed me on the cheek the way the Frenchmen do. And while I was in that bed, I started shaking that bed apart. I was freezing to death. I didn't know what was wrong. It was shock. I never knew what shock was. But Mr. Blurback said to me, cognac? Well, I was a drinker, but not then. Turned my stomach to think about it. I know. He said, Cappy, it sounded like coffee, so yeah. Now, he gave me his cup of coffee, only had about 90% cognac in it. Oh, man. I drank it, but in about 15 minutes, I cleared up. It did the job. Well, that helped a lot. I was there for approximately 2 hours. Different things happening with other people coming in to see the American flyer. And finally, their faces, they got real sober. They said, the Bosch. Okay, here comes the crowd. This German officer walked over to me. The first words out of his mouth, he put his finger about that far from my nose. He said, for you, der war is over. And I looked at him, yeah, you sucker, you. So he asked us, where is your pistol? Where is your comrades, your money, all this? And I'm playing dumb. I don't know what he's talking about. Well, finally, the French had told me, don't walk. Tell him you can't walk. Hey, why would I argue? Okay. So he and his driver in the car carried me out to the car and put me in the back seat, started driving away, and he's sitting there with that Luger just a few inches from my nose all the time. I thought, brother, I hope you're not of a nervous trigger finger. We're driving through the country, stop at these hotels, and the people come running out to see the Amerikaner Flieger, Amerikaner Flieger. And I'm like a monkey on display in the back seat. And the driver of the car tried to communicate with me and said, Mutter, it must be mother, yeah, brother, all this. Oh, he was tickled silly he could talk to that American. And I was nosy because he had a plate on a chain around his neck. And I thought, that has to be Gestapo for sure. I said, is that Gestapo? And he laughed like mad. He said, 999, military police. But then I felt a lot better. But we were driving for quite a while and stopped. I knew some words in German. We came to this cement building with bars on the window. And Achtung, verboten Gaszell. I said, oh no. Now they're going to gas me. After all this, I can't know why. Well, I'll wait till they make their move, then I'll make mine. I'll kick the door against them and hobble across the field or grab the Luger, anything. I'm not going in there like a lamb into the slaughter. And I kept fiddling around. I heard a noise at the back of the car. I had a look, and I looked over my shoulder. And all they were doing was filling the gas tank. There was just a gas stove at the gas station. And a big load left. Ooh, he saved again. Then he took me to a big city, Arras, in France, to a hospital. And there the doctors operated on me, took the bullets out of me and pulled some of the shrapnel out and got me all fixed up, offered it to me for souvenirs. I said, no thanks, you keep it. And I was there for 2 weeks. I was in the bed, and they gave me white bread because I was on wounded rations, I guess, combat. And there was an English kid in the same room. His leg shot up pretty bad. And he got me to say, Ruth and Morgan here, doctor, when they come in. Okay, I did it. But one day I was reading a book. This doctor came in when he left. Bill, he said, they're mad at you. I said, for what? He said, you didn't come to attention in bed for that officer. I said, well, and now you're going to give you black bread, no more white bread. I said, they tell them what they can do with that white bread, they can stuff it. I'm coming to bed. I'm coming to attention in bed for them. They're mad. I was there about 2 weeks, and they took me out of that place. And from there, I went to the place he just had the book about, Dulag Luft Interrogation Center. That's fun, believe me. A 6x8 room. I counted nail heads on the walls, killed flies, did everything imaginable to kill the boredom, and they come in. And the food I got there was 3 potatoes with the long sprouts hanging on. They took them right out of the dirt, and that's the way I got it, cooked that way. A slice of bread and some ersatz coffee or tea. And I looked at it, yuck. Well, I didn't eat the sprouts for a day or two, but after the second or third day, I ate everything that was there. I was hungry. So they didn't give you much, and then they work on you all the time. And they asked you the name, rank, serial number naturally. And it got cold in there. And they had a little thing on the wall, you turn it, and the flag would drop, and the guard would hear it, and he'd come. And he wouldn't come, and I'd kick on the door, and clump, 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 yeah. Cold, yeah. In about a half hour's time, now I could hardly breathe. Hot and cold. They kept that up for days on time. And along with the fact that my left leg had no medical attention, and I'll tell you, it hurt more than the worst toothache I ever had in my life. Man, did that thump and pound. And I'd show it to them, and they wouldn't do anything about it. But anyhow, finally, when they decided to let me out of there, at long last they let me out, and I told one of them I wanted to go to the dispensary for my leg, and they had me stand like a criminal with my hands on the wall, and there was a tile wall. When he opened that up, I said, you go back there, I bet you my fingernails or claw marks are still in that tile. Man, did that hurt. But after I got it out there, it helped a lot better. And from there, they take you to a big prison camp. I went to Stalag Luft 3 for 9 months, and then Stalag Luft 1 in the Baltic Sea for a few months. Then they hauled us again, all by 48 boxcar. Take us cross country, take your shoes away when they put you in the boxcar, and by the time they'd stop, relieve yourself. Well, believe me, there was a mad exodus out of those boxcars across the field to relieve yourself. And then tiptoe way back because our feet were tender on those rocks. From Stalag Luft 1, I went to Stalag 7A, and then I ended up in Stalag 17B, which was the one they made the movie about, Stalag 17B. The first camp, Stalag Luft 1, where they had the Great Escape movie. Am I running on time, Dave?
Got another 5 minutes or something?
Well, that's it. That's just about it. And from at the end of the war, just before the end of the war, we could see the flash and hear the guns going off in Vienna. And they took us out of there and walked this one, supposedly the longest recorded march over there at all. We were 300 miles they walked us. And I'm telling you, there wasn't much food, it was a heck of a long walk. The first day out, I sunburned my nose. And my buddy and I went to bed that night in the field with a little German thin blanket. His on the bottom, mine on top, and we woke up in the morning, 2 inches of snow on top. I said, oh, this is great. What a deal. But we made that march to a big pine forest. We were there about 2 weeks, and near the town of Brownell, and that's where the 13th Army Division finally liberated us. And I said to the guys, where the heck have you been? I've been looking for you. Well, the guy said, well, we got here as fast as we could. So that was the end of that. I finally, we made it. We're free again. That's about the end of my story for now.
I just wanted to say one thing about Frank Speer, who is the next speaker. He has a table where he is selling his book and books. He's written several books about his experience. This one is One Down, One Dead. Really interesting book. I suggest you go over and take a look at it and buy a couple of them because it's very well written and very interesting. Just one more thing before I turn over to Frank. This is I didn't mention this. This is a piece of Frank Lachinski's plane that he picked up in Hungary on a trip there, 2 or 3 years ago? And so you might want to come up and take a look at it. It's just kind of an interesting part of the war that he brought back. It's painted a certain gray. He can explain it. It was painted a this color gray because it was a radar. It bombed by radar. It had a radar device called a Mickey, and the gray made it more camouflaged.
The plane was used on lone wolf missions there were a lot of periods of time when the weather in Europe was very bad. You couldn't send up a regular bombing mission, so that plane was sent up with one at a time to keep on harassing the Germans. But we were using it at that time because in case we ran into bad weather over the target, we would use the radar to aim the bombs.
Anyway, I'll turn you over to Frank Speer, and again, his book. You can buy it over at his table in the museum.
Thank you. Since I've been out of school, I can't talk unless I'm standing up. In the first place, these seats are so hard, and you've been here for a while, and I'm probably not going to tell you anything that's interesting, so if you want to take a little nap, now's the time to do it. And we'll make sure that we wake you up when this is over so you don't miss your next appointment over at my bookstore, so to speak. All right, I'm going to tell you a few things. I'll start at the beginning. I had a very difficult time getting into aviation cadets and had several things wrong. For example, I had a wisdom tooth that was missing. Taboo, you got to have all your teeth to become an aviation cadet. You could not be married. I was married. But eventually, the need arose to the point that they lowered their standards to the fact that I could then get in. And I did, and in a short time after training, I became an ace in the 4th Fighter Group, which was the top scoring Allied group in the war. We had over 1,000 Germans destroyed. Those are all good Germans now. They're underground. Okay, so time went on, and I got shot down strafing an aerodrome, which is the most dangerous thing you can do in a plane. I never had any fear of an airplane in the sky, but when you strafe an aerodrome with hundreds of guns all aiming at you, it becomes a little hairy, because occasionally somebody's going to miss and hit you. But that's what happened. I was so low that I was forced to crash land. I couldn't get high enough to parachute because my engine was dead, and the planes don't fly too well that way, only having one engine to begin with. Before I get into the rest of the story, I might tell you that there's been a great misconception about fighter pilots. Now, I'm a fighter pilot. I was a fighter pilot. I went into this business, so to speak, knowing that people's regard for fighter pilots was that they were very aggressive, obnoxious, overpowering, womanizers, hard drinking, and all that sort of thing. And as you can see, that's absolutely not true. I am one of the nicest guys you'll ever see. I have never been a womanizer, at least not so my wife knew. And at that time I didn't drink. I only drank afterwards, after I got married. Well, whatever. At any rate, I just wanted to clear that up. We are real nice guys. But we had a job to do. And we did our best to knock those lousy krauts out of the air. I hope there's none around here at the moment, at least not one that's armed. Now, I like to tell about prison camp. A lot has been said about what it's like to be a prisoner of war. And I must tell you that generally when I start to speak, the AT-6s start taking off. Now, the AT-6 is the one that makes all the racket. And I understand the reason they do is because, and this is technical, the propeller is geared to the point that the tips of the propeller are breaking the sound barrier. That's what makes that noise when they're taking off. So once they get airborne, the pilot can't stand it anymore, so he pulls back on the throttle. At any rate, being a prisoner of war was a horrible thing to be. It was not something I would recommend. These Nazi spas, so to speak, were not really all they were cracked up to be. We were very regimented, we were very starved, but I want to tell you one thing about the American soldier. GIs, pilots, no matter who they are, there is never a time that I have known, and I've been in some pretty dire circumstances, there's never been a time where somebody's not doing something stupid or making a joke or whatnot. I want to tell you a few of those things that prove my point. Every night, for example, as it was getting dusk, as a prisoner of war, you were all rounded up on the parade ground in formation, and you were counted to make sure nobody had escaped during the day. Now, I don't know why anybody wanted to escape. They were treating us so well, and the food was so good, and the beds were wonderful, and the service was super. So I don't know why anybody wanted to escape, but occasionally people attempted to do it. And the Germans wanted to make sure that they would stay in this luxurious place they had for us. Once they have counted you and verified that they have the right number, you are escorted to your barracks. The barracks doors are locked, the windows are shuttered, they turn dogs loose in the compound, and then they come in and count you again in your room. Now, the camp that I was in, Stalag 3, we had rooms with 15 people per room. It was like about a 20 by 20 foot room with bunks around the perimeter, triple deckers. So that we had 15 guys in the room. All right, what happens when you're locked in at night? 2 Germans come in to count you in your room. So one goes around the room clockwise, one goes around the room counterclockwise, each counting. They get to the door, verify the count, and then they go on to the next room. So normally this works out like the very monotonous tone. They're saying, they're coming around 13, 14, 15 in unison. Well, I had the middle bunk next to the door. One night, totally unrehearsed, not even thought about, but as they were counting us, they got around 15, and in the same monotone, I said 16. Now, each one thought the other one had said 16. So they argue a bit, and then finally, you may well know that in Germany, you don't question rank. You don't talk back. Once your superior says, that's it, that's it. So, the superior, in this case the sergeant, he is just chewing out this poor private who's standing in the brace like this, you know, and he's calling him a Dumikoff and every kind of an idiot you might think, and the guy, poor guy standing there probably thinking to himself, you dumb bastard, you're the one who said it. But he, of course, did not say this. So they decide to go around again. So they come around, 13, 14, 15, and I put in 16. Things started all over again. Poor private, he just taking this abuse and can't do a darn thing about it, standing there braced, red in the face, and just totally out of it. Okay, the third time around, as they got near the door, 13, 14, and I thought to myself, I'm not going to do it. I don't want cooler time. That's where I would end up. So I didn't do anything. They got 14, 15. There's deathly silence. Then, incidentally, the sergeant, when he was counting, was not even looking at us. He's going like this, and he's looking over his shoulder to see where his private is making the mistake. So we get around, and there's no 16, and okay, the sergeant, he just crucifies this poor private who's standing there at attention, and he is livid, and he just so frustrated, if you can imagine how frustrated that could be. And finally he says, yeah, 15. He's agreeing he made the mistake. So, you know, that's totally unrehearsed, but it's humor under very dire circumstances. You know, in this camp, our food was horrendous. To begin with, I was in 11 months. I lost 67 pounds. Now, I want to recommend this as a diet for anybody who might be interested in losing weight. You go on this diet, you're bound to lose weight. And so, I'll tell you a little bit about that food. Now, they gave us generally a quarter of a loaf of bread a week per person. Now, this bread was soggy, unpalatable, undigestible. The only way we could eat it and keep it down was we'd throw it on the stove and leave it there till it dried out hard enough that you could pound a nail with it. Then you break it up and eat it, and it was fine. If you tried to do it without heating it like that, this bread produced the finest octane of methane gas you have ever in your life seen. You close that room with 15 guys in there at night, even the cockroaches wouldn't come in. It was so terrible. At any rate, they could have fired up the whole Luftwaffe with this bread if they could capture that gas that we prisoners generated. Another thing that we had, every day we had a soup, which they call the soup. We had two kinds primarily. One was gray death, the other was green death. The gray death was like pure wallpaper paste, like you might use to put wallpaper up. The green death was just like the same thing, except that it was green. They must have thrown some grass or something in it. I might also point out that occasionally we had a real treat. We had pea soup. Now, we had pea soup like you have never heard of before. Apparently, where they grew these peas, there must have been some kind of butterfly or something laid an egg on each pea, And this creature developed inside the pea. So the time it was mature, the pea that is, so was the insect. And it had a hard shell, so that when you bit into these peas, it was like eating grape nuts. It crackled. Probably the best source of protein that Germans ever gave us. What else did we have? We were supposed to have a Red Cross parcel per person per week. Now the Red Cross parcels were made in this country, in Germany, or in Switzerland, and various places, Australia, and they were made up to provide the minimum nutritional requirements for one man for 1 week. Now we generally got a fifth of one of these parcels per week. And out of those parcels, we would have certain things which were would not be contaminated or whatnot, and we would try and save up a little bit of them because we had a feeling that Germans were going to move us, and we wanted to have something that we could trade with civilians for food. Now I was very fortunate. I didn't smoke. And in these parcels there were cigarettes, American cigarettes. And we used the cigarettes for money playing poker. And I was fabulously wealthy. So I rather controlled the smoking in our particular little compound. This was like the silver coinage. The gold coinage, the gold standard was the D-bar, which was a chocolate bar. It was not the kind of a chocolate bar that you would buy in a store and eat with relish. It was a concentrated kind of thing that, but it was good. And it was worth a lot of money on the market. There goes that AT6 again. You can cut back now. Okay, so incidentally, when the Germans moved us out of the camp because it appeared that we were going to be rescued by the Russians, and believe me, we had some doubts about whether we wanted to be rescued by the Russians. We were not sure which way we wanted to go. But at any rate, the Krauts moved us out because we were bargaining chips, you know, and they moved us to a safe area. This was in the middle of the winter, the time of the Battle of the Bulge. You know how horrible that winter was? The worst Germany's had in decades. They moved us out in that weather, and we were poorly clothed, poorly fed. We were sick. Sick, you wouldn't believe. We had, in the camp, we had 40-hole latrines, and they got a lot of business. The problem was you never knew which end was coming out first. The food, we had dysentery, we were throwing up, you know, it's just horrible. And that became even worse when we got on the 40 and 8s that he talked about. They shoved 50 or 60 of us in there to the point we couldn't sit down or lie down or anything, and no sanitary facilities. Every few hours they would stop in some place and they would open the doors and let us out. You have never seen a mass moon like that. Everybody out, pull down your pants and let it go. We spread more excrement over Germany than any division could possibly do. We just, we had no shame. Just let her go. All right, now the next thing I wanted to talk about was on one of these marches, where we had, each of us had saved up something with which to barter. First night out, this was in the spring on another march, one of our fellows who was a farm boy from Illinois, who had been raised a good life on the farm, eating everything and dozens of eggs, and he just, all the time he was in prison camp, he wanted to have a fresh egg. No way he could get one. However, he saved up from his Red Cross parcels, he saved up cocoa. And he finally had 2/3 of a tin of cocoa when they took us on this march. First night out, they put us in a big park that had an iron fence around it, and they put guards around this iron fence. And people from the village came to look through the fence at us like we were animals in a zoo, which is about what we were at that point. So this guy was out with his tin of chocolate, going around the fence looking for someone who might have a fresh egg that they would exchange for his chocolate or his cocoa. He finally found the young woman who said, "I have one." He showed her the chocolate. She looked at it and said, "No, I want a full can." He said, "Okay, you go get the egg, I'll go get the chocolate." He manufactured chocolate out of the dark dirt in the ground there. He mixed in with the cocoa, and it looked pretty good because it was dusk, and he had a full can for when she came back with the egg. They exchanged the chocolate for the egg. He had no way to cook the egg at this point, and so he wrapped it in toilet paper, which is the only thing we had plenty of at that particular point, put it in his pack where it would be safe until he could find a place to cook it. A couple days later, they had us dispersed in a field near a wood, and he was able to get a few twigs together and light a fire and prepare to cook this egg. He got out his little tin can frying pan and the egg and had this little fire going, and here's this guy making like a French chef with all the moves, and a ring of hungry Kriegies standing around him, drooling about the thought of him going to be able to eat this egg. So he gets to the point of everything is ready. He taps the egg lightly on his frying pan. It didn't break. He tapped it a little harder. It didn't break. He tapped it hard. It didn't break. Then he checked and looked at this thing, and here, for his tin of dirt, he had received a ceramic egg. How funny things happen, right? All kinds of things happen in prison camp. It's unbelievable. If you lose your humor, you lose your life, really. It's surprising how people can go through all of this stuff and still continue to operate and be human beings. How am I doing on time here? Okay. I think maybe you might be interested in abortive escapes. I escaped 3 times before I finally made it. And the first time I escaped, you cannot believe how stupid a person can be, as I was. We were being marched from one camp to another, and we had a line 4 abreast, all moving in that direction. An armed guard every 50 feet or so on each side of us, so that none of us would be tempted to break out and run. It was getting dusk, and I could see up ahead that the column was coming to this little village, and they were turning left before they got into the village, but the road went right straight up through the village. So I said to my buddy, we're on this side, I said to him, you think you might be up to trying something? He said, yeah, what do you have in mind? I said, okay, when we get to that corner, when everybody's turning left, you and I are going to go straight. Now, we're standing here like now, we're talking, we're moving our arms. When we do this, we're going to continue that. You don't look back, you don't change pace. We just go on waving our arms, talking to each other, just like we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. You know something? It worked. We got there, we got to the corner, we just kind of stepped out and sauntered up through town, nodding to people as they were going by. The fact that we had American uniforms on didn't seem to bother anybody. But we went right straight through that town and nobody even questioned us. Of course, we're thinking, you know, what's a bullet feel like in your back? Or what if they turn one of those dogs on you? We were, you might call in a condition of little green apples at that point. But we made it. It worked. Unfortunately, we got captured again. So that didn't work so well, but it gave us experience. To make a long story short, our third time we got out, we encountered some French forced laborers. These were people, they locked them up at night, left them out in the daytime to farm, do the farm work and whatnot. They were sort of like parolees. Well, they told us to wait there till dusk and they'd come pick us up. They took us into their barracks, so to speak, and hid us under their huge feather mattresses when the Germans came to count them at night. And they stole food and kept us going for a couple of weeks while we were there. And then one day I looked out, and we stayed in the barracks during the day so the Germans wouldn't see us, because we obviously were dressed in American uniforms. You know, you don't go out and do the field work in Germany that way. But I looked out, and here is a whole detachment of German soldiers moving into the barn 30, 40 feet away from where we are. I thought, oh my gosh, this is a tough program. At any rate, they put all their equipment in this barn, and in a couple of days, all the soldiers left all their equipment there and left one guard. And I kept looking at this guy, and I swear I knew him. It was one of our guards from the prison camp, one of the more friendly ones. And I said to my buddy, I'm going out there and talk to him. So I went over to him. You could hear the guns getting closer all the time. Patton's army was coming in that direction. I went over to him, and I'll wait till this thing gets over. There we go. I went over to him and I said, for you, der War is over. He said, yeah. I said, I'd like to ask you, when the Americanas come, I'd like to have your pistol as a souvenir. He says, here, take it. I said, well, I'll see that you get good treatment when they come in return for this. He said, there's more inside. So we went in and armed my buddy, and we went back in. We sworn to secrecy. We're not in there 10 minutes, there's a knock on the door. I look out, here's a German armed soldier. And of course we were armed, so I wasn't really fearful of him. So I opened the door crack, and he's handing me his rifle. He wants to surrender for good treatment. We wound up with 24 German soldiers and an officer, which we turned over to Patton's forward group. You know what Patton did? Or what his group did? They locked us up. They said, we don't know who you are. We have no way of knowing that you're not a German spy. So they locked us up. Well, that night, we were locked up in this one-room schoolroom, and we just loved sleeping in that master's bedroom he had a chick on that thick. We just conked out in there. All of a sudden, all hell broke loose. Guns going off, I mean big caliber stuff. We were in the midst of a artillery outfit. And I said to my buddy, you know, we're sending it out. I think something's going to come back. This ain't my kind of war. Let's get out of here. So our guard had kind of disappeared into the slit trenches or something. We broke out and we hitchhiked from there back to Nuremberg. And that's another story, but I guess I'm probably out of time now, huh?
If you want to continue, you can. We have we could entertain some questions, or we have a gentleman right here who has served as with the American Army dealing with German prisoners who would like to say just a few words, if that's all right with you.
Yeah. I'm dry now anyway. Thank you, folks.
We have an added attraction today, Roy Sharman, who I'll let him describe what he did. He was in the Army during the Second World War and dealt with German prisoners in this country. If you could give us a brief description of your work.
The Italian and the German prisoners of war that I dealt with were stationed in various prisoner of war camps down south. With the Italians, I had been with a company of Italians in Florida. They were all mechanics, and they were learning to assemble and disassemble the motor in the 2.5-ton GMC trucks. Next, I was with a group of Italians who were learning to drive these trucks. Some of them were rather short of stature, so we had to provide cushions for some of them so that they could reach the pedals to do the double shifting. Then I got assigned to several German prisoner of war camps. The more important one was down at Fort Bliss in Florida. I got assigned there to work for a major who at that time was in charge of what they called re-education of the Germans. Later on they called it psychological warfare, but at that time it was re-education. At the same time I worked for the captain who was intelligence officer for Fort Bliss, for the camp, and so I assembled various records for these officers, and for a period of time I censored the mail. I had two Germans working with me in the mail room as I censored this mail. Near the end of the war, I served as a guard for about a month in a little branch camp down by the Rio Grande, and then also was in charge there of an office. We at that point had the German prisoners working in the cotton fields there around El Paso. They got paid a little bit for their work. The Italians and the Germans, where I had been, they all had been taken well care of. I had no problems. At Fort Bliss, we did have one fellow escape briefly, but I was unaware of any other escapes. I'm sure there were some, but that's sort of in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And thank you, Frank and Paul. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to address to the POWs? No questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending. It's been a good session, and thank you, gentlemen, for your time.